Hello and welcome to Success is Never Accidental, the show where we get to explore strategies for success, the mindset for success, and look at some of the disciplines that contribute to success. And so much success can actually be attributed to great leadership skills. And there is nobody better qualified to talk about managing your mindset, learning from adversity, working together as a team, or motivating others than my guest today. Dave Sanderson is an internationally recognized speaker and author who uses his own life-changing experience to mentor others to develop their leadership skills. One of the very last passengers to exit flight US 1549 when it crash landed on the Hudson on that fateful day in January 2009. Please help me welcome Dave Sanderson. Hi, Dave, and welcome to Success is Never Accidental. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing some of your wisdom, insights, and experiences.
Lynne, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Dave, you've had an incredible career, more than one career. What do you think are some of the factors that have contributed to your success?
Well, thank you for that question. And people don't ask that in a lot of different ways, but if you sort of put it all in one sort of gel, I think with the couple contributing factors to where I have the opportunity to be where I am. Number one, I was very blessed when in 1984 that a mentor came into my life who I did not know who was going to be a mentor. And long story short, I was just managing restaurants. My dad told me I had to get out of the house and get a job in 1983. And he got me my first job because I wasn't out of the house. And it happened to be a place called Howard Johnson Hotels and Restaurants. And my third stop was here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am currently. And a gentleman and his wife would come in every night to the restaurant, have coffee and ice cream, and we talk. And I found out over a matter of time that he owned 80 movie theaters and restaurants throughout the Carolinas over a number of years. And he took me on. He asked me a question, Lynn, and from your background and my background, what happened was actually December 24th, 1984. I remember it like it was yesterday. He came to the restaurant early. He came up and said, I want to show you what I got my wife Bonnie for Christmas. It was a brand new blue Corvette. I was 24 then, never seen a Corvette, never smelled a Corvette. I couldn't even spell Corvette, but it was the coolest car I ever saw. And he threw me the keys. We took a ride up and down Woodlawn Road here in Charlotte. And I gave the keys. I said, she's going to dig this. He goes, you need one of these. I said, Bill, I'm making $13,000 a year. I can barely afford my rent. He goes, that's your problem. It's your mindset. Let me show you what it's going to take to be successful. And for 13 years, Lynn, he mentored me. He gave me just the lessons that you need as a young person and took interest in me. So I think number one, I had a mentor who came into my life, and in 1997, he passed away. He passed away of lung cancer, but he left me something. He left me his notes he wrote down in 1929 and he said, well, I want you to promise me one thing. I said, what? He goes, do not let this die with you. And so he passed away in September of that year. And I didn't do anything with these notes until after the miracle on the Hudson. I found these notes in this credenza right back here. And that's been my mission. So number one, get a mentor, number one. Number two, the first thing he did, and this is how number three came about. First thing he did, he insisted that I invest in myself, personal development. So that's when I started going. The first one was Jim Rohn, and then Tom Hopkins, and then Tony Robbins. I started investing myself every year. And he helped me put together, and I still do this today, a personal development budget for the year. And now it used to be in the hundreds, and now it's in the 5 figures, because I know how important it is to invest in yourself. So number two, you got to invest in yourself. And then number three, when Bill passed away in 1997 is when Tony asked me to be an assistant head of security. Tony Robbins did for him in 1997. So one of the lessons I tell people is when one mentor sort of passes the next session of their lives, another one will show up, but you got to keep your eyes open. You got to keep your eyes open, because these people, as we were talking about earlier, will come into your life And if you don't have the acuity to recognize when they come in and take the opportunity, then you may pass up. So those are three things, have a mentor, personal development, and make sure you recognize the proximity you are with people that can help you do what you need to do.
And I totally sign up for all of those, Dave. And it's interesting, isn't it, that people come into our lives when we need them most. And for you, it was that mentor when you were just a young man. And we're lucky if they come into our lives and we need them most. But as you say, we've got to be open to the opportunities. We're going to talk about your life-changing moment in a minute. But I had two life-changing experiences. One you will one was a Tony Robbins moment, but the first one actually was when I was only 19. I was signed up to go to university in Belfast to do modern languages, and I thought I wanted to be a French teacher. And I had that desire for many, many years. But I went for a summer job in a holiday camp in Morecambe in England, and I just got exposed to an incredible group of people, seasonal workers who just really had very little certainty in their lives, and some of them had very harsh stories. And I just loved talking to them, and I just came to the realization that life was more than about teaching French and English. So I got the boat back. I couldn't even afford to fly. I got the boat back to Northern Ireland. I changed my course and I did social work, and the rest is history. The second life-changing moment was in 1999 in Geneva. And I did my first UPW with Tony Robbins. And that was just really a life-changing moment for me in terms of all the insights I got. And after the fire walk, I never drank coffee again. I haven't had coffee in 20-something years. And I decided I was going to set up my own consultancy business. And I did that then 2 years later. But that's not about me. Tell us about your life-changing event, because that was huge.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Likewise, I think everybody, and I call them either their defining moments or their personal plane crash moment. That moment that something happens that triggers you, and that's that moment you get to, we call that threshold moment, right? You can go either way, right? Mine happened to be on January 15, 2009, where I was on a business trip. Third day of a business trip, I ended up in a great place called Brooklyn, New York. And we were working in a distribution center, which if people haven't ever been in manufacturing and distribution, which I was in at that point in time, they're 24-hour operations primarily. So we went in early so we could see the trucks coming in and out, because we were in technology. We wanted to see how it was going to work. Okay, great. Well, we got done at 10 o'clock that morning. And I always, my pattern was I schedule the last flight out, because you never know how the day's going to go. It could go great, it could go bad, but I always got the last flight out. So when I got out at 10, I'm like, I get to go home early. And so I work with a traveler. She put me on a flight called US Airways Flight 1549, which happened to be now known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Because as we know now, what happened that day, I gave up a first class seat at 5 o'clock for seat 15A on this flight 1549 on January 15th. And, I got on, I was just a normal flight until all of a sudden you hear explosion. And that's when things got a little, I would say a little dicey, but I didn't panic, because I fly so often. Planes lose engines. Planes have multiple engines. No worries. I'm not getting home early. That's exactly what I thought. I'm not getting home early. And then a couple minutes later, as we're banking, you all of a sudden realize you're not getting home at all. Because as soon as you start to cross over the George Washington Bridge, and he barely missed the bridge, he does not get enough credit for clearing that bridge, I think. It's my personal opinion. All of a sudden, we're crashing into the Hudson River. And, I've never seen, and I don't know if anybody here has ever seen, a plane that's crashed into water, but normally no one survives. But fortunately, we survived. But now there's another major issue. You got a plane, an Airbus, sinking in 36-degree water, and you got to get out. So, my game plan, and I played sports, Lynne, and playing sports and probably in business likewise, but you always have a game plan before you go into a meeting or a game. And my game plan was aisle up out. I kept telling my mind, if I survive, I got to be able to get out of it. So it's aisle up, out, aisle up, out, aisle up, out. That was my strategy. That was my game plan. And so it was my time. I got to the aisle. Okay, ready to go. Aisle up, out. And then that's when everything changed for me at that moment. That's the moment that, all of a sudden I start hearing my mother start talking to me in my head. And my mom passed away in 1997, but there was something she would say to me when I was a child, and all of a sudden just popped into my head and was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And, I tell people, I've analyzed that for the last several years, like why, what did my mom really was telling me? And I tell people, she didn't tell me. She asked me the question, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. It's not like do the right thing. It's like, you got to make the choice. You have to make the choice. And I could have walked out of the plane, Lynne, and everything would have been fine. But my choice was you help other people first. And that's why I went over the seats towards the back of the plane, see if anybody needed help in the back of the plane. And the back of the plane was already submerged under the water. People don't see that because they only see the front picture. But if you see the side picture, it's actually like this. It's underwater. So the water was about chest level deep. And people were moving. And so I saw, you got push, you got water, you got luggage, you got just trying to make your way out. And the first light that I saw was on the right side of the plane. I'm like, I got to get out of here. So I started getting out of the plane at 10F, and I looked out, Lynne, and it was an amazing sight. Already that wing was filled up and that boat was filled up, and people already being rescued. And I tell people the real heroes that day were the first responders. Whoever said that is exactly correct because they were there in a couple of minutes. So that's why, Lynne, I was inside this plane sinking in 36-degree water for about 7 minutes, waist deep in water, because I was holding on to the lifeboat. Because if you don't know about the Hudson River, and I've learned a lot about it, it's got an extremely fast current. And that plane actually floated down the river about a half a mile, 24 minutes. So as the plane was floating down the river, that lifeboat was floating out into the river. So that's why I was holding on to the lifeboat until I felt the plane shift. And that's the moment, the first thought that I thought was, and you will appreciate this. First thought was about that movie Titanic. When that boat tipped up and all you see is that everybody's being pulled, sucked down in that big vacuum. And that's exactly what I thought, man. That's like, this thing's going down. I got to get out of here. I got to get away from the plane. And that's why I swam to the closest boat that I could find to have to eat in that wing. And I tell people, thank goodness my mom and dad made me learn how to swim. I mean, these are the lessons. This is why my first book's called Moments Matter, because what you realize after you go through a traumatic life experience is all the moments in your life are there for a reason. And you never may think that they mean anything. But all of a sudden, that one time when you had to swim across the river when you were in Boy Scouts, right, give you the certainty to do what you have to do when you have to step up. Those times when you had to lead and you know nothing about the circumstance, but you have to lead people, then you step up. That's why we named the book Moments Matter, Lynne, because all of a sudden I went back and looked at all these moments in my life that all were there. And all of a sudden I looked back, I'm like, that was the reason that moment happened. So that moment on January 15, 2009, I could do what I needed to do.
Moments matter, choices matter, and having a game plan that is bigger than yourself really matters. Tell us how we can get your books. Where will people find your books, Steve?
Well, they would love to. I would love to personalize them. They go to my website, davesandersonspeaks.com. I'd love to personalize it, but or they go to Amazon if they have Amazon access, and all the books are now on Amazon. My new book is called The Limitless Life. It came out 3 weeks ago. And Lynne, this book's really the culmination of the 3-book series where I actually break down after the plane crash and share 15 lessons that came out of that experience that you can apply either individually or collectively. When you get in those points in time where, and I call them those personal plane crash moments or those defining moments, and you need a reference of somebody who's actually done it. These are 15 lessons. And that's why I call it the limitless life, because, if you look at it from a big perspective, life is limitless if you have the correct mindset. Most people, and that's why if you see the cover of this book, that's the actual seatbelt from the seat from that plane. We took a picture of and got on. So and you notice back if you see it, it's frayed because life is strange. Life is uncertain. And this life is pressure. And that there's so much pressure when you're, I mean, when you crash land and you're going forward, that pressure. So yeah, I'm very proud of all 3 books, but go on Amazon if you would like to check those out.
Definitely looking forward to reading The Limitless Life. Dave, so many of the people that I work with in the public sector who are providing child protection, fostering, adoption, services for children in care, and also those who provide for the increasing mental health needs of the population. They really are the unsung heroes. Thinking about the lessons from your book, The Limitless Life, what are 2 or 3 things that you would share with that sector of people?
Well, thank you, because I do a lot of work with first responders and mental health people because they're and the military, because they're very challenged right now. I mean, mental health is something that, candidly, as you probably realize, and I've learned to realize, it's a major issue, at least in the United States right now. And so, some of the things that I talk about in this book, some of the lessons I talk about is about the meaning, because the meaning you attach to something produces the emotion that comes out. So you got to be able to you got to become a master, be able to reframe meanings. And that's something that I was able to do. I had the training, but I was able to take a meaning. And I'll give you a perfect example how this sort of came about. I was in the green room at Good Morning America, which is a TV show here in the United States, with other passengers in the crew. We just got done. So we were in the green room, and one of the passengers, Lynne, started getting emotional. He just started getting emotional. And I don't mean emotionally crying, I mean emotionally outburst. And my first thought was, what's wrong with him? We survived the plane crash on national TV. How bad can it get? What I found out, he was going through a divorce and he lost his job. So I started realizing the meaning he attached to that plane crash was devastation. The meaning I attached, it was a blessing, because all of a sudden it opened up an opportunity for me to be able to serve at a different level. So if I ever had the opportunity to work with this gentleman, first thing I would do is start helping him reframe that meaning of devastation. Because as you know, and I know, everything happens for a reason and a purpose, and it serves us. That divorce happened for a reason and a purpose. May not seem at that point in time it was a positive one, but it happened for a reason and a purpose. So first thing we talk about is meaning, right? Second thing I talk about in the book, it actually came from a blog that I wrote that went viral. And it's one of those blogs that you write, that you used to write, and you don't even think anything about it. And I talk about the power of editing. And people say, what's that? I said, well, when I write books, I write articles, I write them, and then we go back and edit, right? Because you got to get it down, you got to figure it out. I said, what if I applied that strategy to my life? If I start editing, making sure I have the right people around me, the right resources around me, how could that change my life? And all of a sudden, when I started editing things and editing about what I eat, editing the people, editing the way I handle my body, editing the way I handle my finances, all of a sudden my life started blossoming. It wasn't just one direction. It was like all different directions. So one of the things I talk about is the power of editing in your life. And another thing I write about is, and you may not have seen this TV show in Ireland or the UK, but it's called Yellowstone. And it's a Western drama. And
I love it. I love it. I've seen the entire series.
I can't wait for the next part. Let's get to the next part. But if you know anything about it, they have this place, that they basically call the train station. And the train station is someplace where no one lives and no one ever finds it, and where you dump your stuff. And I said, what if you, and I wrote this about, what if you could take your stuff to the train station every morning? Just dump your stuff. No one knows what it is. No one knows where it's at, and it's gone forever. How could that change your life? So I write this story about every day you need to go to the train station. Just to be able to dump all your stuff and start your day fresh from zero. Because sometimes and this only came from something my first boss in sales taught me. He taught me, because I was frustrated. When you're not making sales, you're behind the curve, you're frustrated, right? What am I doing wrong? You're asking all the wrong questions. And he looked at me and said, hey, Dave, sometimes just getting to zero is a good day. Yeah. I said, wow. That changed my perspective, and that's how the train station sort of metaphor came about. It's like, what if you could dump all this stuff every day? And you started zero instead of negative. And all of a sudden, I started doing that. So every morning, my wife's like, "How are you so happy every day?" Because I dumped my crap the night before. That's why. I don't wake up with crap. Now, as we know, stuff happens through the day, right? You got to deal with it, right? You got to deal with it. But don't go to bed with it. Dump it at the train station. So those are three things that I share, and just strategies that candidly have helped me. And I learned because many people from that, I'm going to give you a little insight. Many people from that day still haven't got back on a plane.
Yeah.
Right? And
And
people
that's
always ask me.
because of the story they tell themselves, and it's
Exactly
about
right.
how they rewrote the script for themselves. And
Right.
I love that bit about asking questions, because asking great questions gives us great opportunities. And some of the questions I encourage people to ask all the time when they're feeling stuck is, what needs to happen for me to take the first step? What else do I need to know in order to make a better decision? But all those questions enable you to see the options and the opportunities. Funny story. I was at an event and they brought on Cole Heiser as
Right.
one of the speakers. As you know, Cole Heiser is one
Yep.
of the stars, maybe the star now that Kevin Costner's parted company.
Yeah.
He came on stage and I was so inspired by him. They were offering a charity event that you could go to Yellowstone. So we went to,
Wow.
it wasn't the actual Yellowstone Ranch because Taylor Sheridan and everybody had fallen out at that time, but we went to a Cole Heiser experience. And you and he have so much in common, because you raised so much money for the Red Cross, and he raises money for tunnels to towers,
Right.
for all of the military and first responders, etc. And that came about from that disaster of 9/11. So do you know him personally? Have you met him?
I have not. He's one of my favorite characters, but you're exactly right. He's got a heart of gold, because I've read a lot about Cole Hauser. And it's interesting you say that, because when I went back in the Hudson River, Lynne, to swim with the Navy SEALs, and that's a whole nother story about going back and facing your fear. And that's what's part of my talk now, is that now part of that money goes now to Tunnel for Towers. Before it was going down in a different direction, but now it's going to that, because people like of that kind of esteem, like Cole Hauser and those kind of people, are now involved. So Gary Sinise, right? People like that. So no, I have not met him yet, but what an experience to have that opportunity to hear him, because I think he is inspiring, because
Such
he
a
walks his
lovely,
talk. He walks his talk.
that's the thing. He's such a lovely, genuine man and just embodies integrity. He definitely walks the talk. And he has the most amazing relationship with his team. You can just see how aligned they are. Which brings me to another question, Dave. Why is team so important? You were talking to me earlier about building and growing and developing your team. Why are
Right.
teams so important to success?
Well, one thing you realize when I just give you go through a plane crash. One thing you realize, there's a few things you realize immediately. First, it's not about you. It's not about you. A lot of people get all caught up. And that's what I think a lot of this generation, millennials and Gen Z, is they think they got to be significant. So it's all about them. So first thing you learn is that. Second thing you learn is it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, gay, lesbian. It doesn't matter. Everybody's the same when you're going down in a plane crash. It doesn't matter whether you're the CEO or the janitor. Everybody's the same. So you got to learn to check your ego at the door. And I think part of the reason I'm so passionate on making sure I have the right team around me is because I want people who are aligned with my mission, who understand why we're doing this, and I want to help them achieve their mission likewise. See, I think if you're a true leader, it's not about, you got to look at the big mission. You set the vision, but it's always about helping other people achieve their missions through your mission. So that's why I'm so passionate about my team, and that's why I painstakingly slow to add people. I have to admit, I put people through a thing called a Colby Index so I can understand how they think. I do all these things because I want people around me who have not a like mindset. I want them different, but I want them to understand we're in this thing for a bigger mission than just making money.
Absolutely. And just to finish off, you mentioned game plan a couple of times earlier. Why is it so important that we aren't in that react phase where we're just letting life happen? Why is a game plan so essential to a fulfilled life?
I'll give you a quick story around that. So, and then I'll give you the answer. So one of the most impactful places I ever had the opportunity to speak was at NASA in Cape Canaveral. Now, I grew up in the 60s and 70s where space was the coolest thing out there. I mean, every kid wanted to be an astronaut. I did too. So I negotiated this package. It wasn't about money. It was about give me the NASA experience. And one of those things they did for me, there's a room at NASA at Cape Canaveral that the remains of the Space Shuttle Columbia, the one that went down, are in. And there's one gentleman who owns that key. And he and I had 1 hour to talk. And he wanted to talk about I said, no, I want to talk about this. But he shared something with me. And this is, I'm going to circle around. This is how this all came about. And I talk about this now. He said, if Apollo 1 doesn't happen, none of it, you remember, or anybody remembers Apollo 1. Apollo 1 was the first one where the astronauts perished in training. All three of them burned up. He said to me, he said, if that doesn't happen, we don't get to the moon. And I was like, what do you, I don't get it, right? He goes, listen, everybody, just gotta remember, this is the 60s, right? You were probably a very young girl at that point in time. This was the 60s. Everybody loved us. Talk about NASA. We had more money than we knew what to do with. We could do anything. And we got casual. We went out of process. And all of a sudden, casualness led to casualties. That's one of the things I talk about. You can't get casual. So if you don't have a process, for your money, you go broke. You don't have a process for your marriage or relationship, you get divorced. You don't have a process for your spiritual being, you may be going sideways. You don't have a game plan or a process for your health, you get sick. So that one lesson, I mean, somebody said casualties leads to casualties. Casualties to casualties. It was a great lesson, but you better have a game plan, a process for everything in your life, because things go sideways very quickly. And I'm going to give you a real life example, if you don't mind. Last Thursday, I was speaking in Washington, D.C. Beautiful event. I get out of the event and I knew something wasn't right. So I get on the plane to come home, and I usually get first class, but I didn't get first class. So I'm all buckled back with everybody else in steerage, right? I'm not feeling really good. And I have trouble getting up. And I get up, and all of a sudden I sort of look down, and my foot, and all of a sudden I looked up, my leg is all swollen. I go to the emergency room, and all of a sudden I'm in the hospital. I'm still actually technically in the hospital. And I found out that I got what's called advanced cellulitis. Oh. And, I was very casual because I'm swimming with the SEALs. I'm a guy, I'm going. But this was like the wake up call, because sometimes you get too casual. And I got casual. And it cost me. You can't be casual. So if you don't have a game plan, you get casual. Casualness leads to casualties.
Casual leads to casualties. Absolutely. Dave, thank you for hanging out with us today. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your inspiration. And thank you for everything you do to acknowledge first responders and other people who are of service, and all the commitment that you've made to supporting them. My son's in Charlotte, just like you are. I'm hoping our paths cross sometime, someday. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Lynne, for having me. God bless.
What an absolutely incredible gentleman. Oh my goodness, so many lessons for success, for life, for leadership. Let's just try and capture a few of them. First thing he said was the importance of having a mentor. We all need mentors. What is a mentor? A mentor is someone who's walked the path before us and who's got the learning and is willing to coach and inspire us. So first thing was find mentors. Secondly, invest in your own development. And interestingly, the more successful you get, the more you tend to spend on your own personal development. So that was really important. And the third thing, and I always say the universe is in your corner. what Dave said was be open to the opportunities that present themselves. I was sharing with him earlier an example of a situation where someone asked me for help. And when I directed them to go to a specific place, they actually made the relationships and find the connections they needed to make a monumental pivot in their life. Then he also talked about having a game plan, that if you aren't in control of your life, then life does things onto you. But when you have a game plan, or what Dave talked about was a process for everything you do, then you're in charge. I loved the piece as well about making each day a fresh start, starting with the zero balance, not letting the challenges and troubles of the day before infect or impact on your tomorrows. I love that. And then he talked about valuing and investing in his team and engaging them in the vision and mission. So absolute testimony to the fact that success is never accidental. There are all sorts of contributory factors to success, however we define that success to be for us. So an amazing interview with Dave Sanderson. Join me next time on Success is Never Accidental.